700,000 years. That's how long it had been since the last human was seen in the galaxy. 700,000 years since the mysterious disappearance of an entire species that had once been feared and respected across countless star systems. The humans hadn't gone quietly. No, their final act had been as dramatic and unexpected as everything else they'd done. In the midst of the greatest war the galaxy had ever known, when the combined might of the Galactic Concordat had finally pushed humanity to the brink of extinction, they simply vanished. One moment, the remaining human fleets were making their last stand around their home system, Earth. The next, a blinding flash of energy swept across the system, and when it cleared, they were gone. Not destroyed, not defeated, just gone, along with their home planet and every colony world they'd established. The Concordat claimed victory, of course. What else could they do? The enemy they'd fought for decades had disappeared. But deep down, the elder species knew the truth. This wasn't a victory. This was something else entirely. And now, 700,000 years later, as the Zethnar exploration vessel Boundless Curiosity approached the coordinates where Earth once stood, they were about to discover exactly what that something else had been. Captain Vexler stood on the bridge of the Boundless Curiosity, his four eyes scanning the sensor readings with growing confusion. According to historical records, this empty region of space had once contained a G-type star with 9 planets, the third of which had been the human homeworld. "Anything?" he asked his science officer, Talia. The Medusan female's tentacles waved in a pattern indicating negation. "Nothing, Captain. Just empty space. No star, no planets, no debris field. It's as if the entire system was removed." "That's impossible," Vexler muttered. "Stars don't just disappear." "The humans were known for achieving the impossible," remarked his first officer, Krell. The Varga's voice carried a hint of the ancestral fear his species still held for humans, despite none having been seen for hundreds of millennia. "Superstition," Vexlo dismissed. "The humans were advanced, yes, but they were still bound by the laws of physics like everyone else." "Would they?" Talia asked quietly. "The historical records suggest otherwise. Their final weapon was propaganda," Vexler interrupted. "A story the Concordat invented to explain how they lost track of a defeated enemy. Nothing more." Krell's ears flattened against his skull. "Then why are we here, Captain? If you don't believe the legends, why did you request this mission?" Vexlor's outer eyelids blinked in sequence, a sign of discomfort among his species. "Because the Concordat High Command received a signal. From here. From nothing." Silence fell over the bridge. "A signal?" Talia's voice was barely a whisper. "What kind of signal?" "Unknown." It lasted for precisely 3.7 seconds and contained no decipherable data, just a burst of energy with a signature that matched old records of human communication protocols. Krell's fur bristled. "Impossible, after 700,000 years? Hence our mission," Vexlor said. "To investigate and determine if..." "Captain?" The sensor operator's voice cut through the conversation. "I'm detecting something. A distortion in space-time, directly ahead." Vexlor turned to the main view screen. At first, he saw nothing but the star-speckled blackness of space. Then, gradually, he noticed a subtle warping, as if the stars themselves were being bent around an invisible object. "Full stop," he ordered. "Raise shields. All sensors focus on that distortion." The ship slowed to a halt, hanging in space a safe distance from the anomaly. "Analysis," Vexler demanded. Talia's tentacles danced over her console. "It appears to be a localized fold in space-time, similar to a wormhole entrance, but stable, contained." I've never seen anything like it. Is it natural? No, Captain. The energy patterns are too regular, too precise. This was created. By whom? Krell asked, though they all suspected the answer. Before anyone could respond, the distortion began to change. What had been a subtle warping now became more pronounced, the fabric of space visibly stretching and folding upon itself. Captain, the anomaly is expanding, the sensor operator reported, panic edging into his voice. Back us off, full reverse, Wexler ordered. The ship's engines hummed as it began to retreat, but it was too late. The distortion expanded rapidly, engulfing the space around them. The stars seemed to stretch into lines, then swirl into a vortex of light. We're caught in some kind of gravitational pull, the helmsman shouted. Break free. Maximum power to engines. It's no use, Captain. We're being drawn in. The bridge crew watched in horror as the vortex opened wider, revealing not the expected darkness of a spatial rift, but a blinding white light that filled the view screen. Race for impact, Wexler shouted, gripping his command chair. But there was no impact. Instead, the ship passed through the light and emerged elsewhere. The blinding light faded, and the crew of the Boundless Curiosity found themselves staring at an impossible sight. A star, a GW with yellow dwarf, exactly like the historical records described, hung in space before them. Around it orbited 9 planets, the third of which was a beautiful blue-green world with swirling white clouds and vast oceans. Earth. Impossible, yet undeniable. This can't be, Wexler whispered. Sensors confirm, Captain, Talia reported, her voice trembling with awe. The star matches the spectral profile of Sol. The planetary arrangement matches historical records of the Sol system, and the third planet, its atmospheric composition, surface features, and orbital parameters all match what we know of Earth. How is this possible? Krell demanded. An entire star system doesn't just disappear for 700,000 years and then reappear. Unless, Talia said slowly, it never disappeared at all. What if it was removed from our space-time, placed somewhere else, somewhere we couldn't reach or detect? You're suggesting the humans somehow took their entire star system out of normal space? Wexler asked incredulously. The historical records of their final weapon, Talia reminded him. The Concordat called it the dimensional fold. They claimed the humans had developed technology to manipulate the fabric of reality itself. But that was just propaganda, Wexler insisted, though his voice lacked conviction now. Wasn't it? No one answered. They didn't need to. The evidence hung before them in the view screen. An entire star system that had been missing for 700,000 years now suddenly returned. Captain? The communications officer called out. We're receiving a transmission from Earth. The bridge fell silent. Put it through, Wexler ordered after a moment's hesitation. The view screen shifted, showing not the face of a human as they had feared, but a simple text message in the modern Galactic Standard language. Welcome, explorers. You have been expected. Proceed to Earth, orbit, for further instructions. No hostile action will be taken against your vessel. Your bid... They know our language, Krell muttered. How could they possibly know our language after all this time? More importantly, Wexler said, who is sending this message? Are there still humans alive down there after 700 millennia? Only one way to find out, Talia suggested. Wexler considered their options. They could retreat, try to find the spatial distortion that had brought them here and return to known space. But would they be able to? And even if they could, what would they report? That they had found Earth but fled without investigating? No. They had come too far to turn back now. Set course for Earth, he ordered. Standard orbit, but be ready to jump to FTL at the first sign of trouble. The boundless curiosity moved forward, passing the outer planets of the system. Each one appeared exactly as the historical records described. The gas giants Jupiter and Saturn with their distinctive rings and moons, the ice giants Uranus and Neptune, and finally the inner rocky world. As they approached Earth, their sensors detected no artificial satellites, no orbital stations, no signs of a technological civilization. No radio transmissions, no artificial light patterns on the night side, Talia reported. If there are humans down there, they're either hiding their presence, or what? Vexfer prompted. Or they've changed beyond our recognition. The ship settled into a stable orbit around Earth. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then, without warning, the communications system activated again. Prepare for visitor. Visitor? Krell echoed. What does that? A flash of light interrupted him as a figure materialized on the bridge. The crew recoiled in shock, some reaching for weapons before Vexler signaled them to stand down. The figure before them was humanoid, but clearly not human, at least not human as the historical records depicted them. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, its body composed of what appeared to be a shifting, silvery substance that flowed like liquid yet maintained a solid form. Where a face should have been, there was only a smooth surface that occasionally rippled with patterns of light. Readings, the figure said, its voice resonating not through the air but directly in their minds. I am the Guardian. Welcome to Earth. What? Are you? Vexlor managed to ask, finding his voice despite his shock. The silvery figure's surface rippled. I am the Guardian, the caretaker of Earth and the Sol system. I was created to watch over this place until the time was right for its return. Created? By the humans? Talia asked. Yes, I am their final creation, their legacy, and their promise of return. Vextor exchanged glances with his officers. The humans have been gone for 700,000 years. Are you saying they still exist? The Guardian's form shifted slightly, the silvery substance flowing into a slightly different configuration. That depends on how you define existence, Captain Vexlor. You know my name, Vexlor noted, unsurprised. I know all of you. Krell, First Officer, Varg Species, Talia, Science Officer, Medusan Species. I have been monitoring your approach since you entered this region of space. Where exactly are we? Talia asked. This can't be the same space where Earth originally existed. That area has been thoroughly mapped and is empty. Perceptive, the Guardian acknowledged. You are in what the humans called a pocket dimension, a self-contained region of space-time, separated from but adjacent to normal space. Earth and the entire Sol system have been here for what you measure as 700,000 years. Heidi, Krell demanded. Why would the humans do this? The Guardian's surface rippled again, this time forming patterns that almost resembled a human face before dissolving back into smooth silver. To survive, to evolve, to prepare. Prepare for what? Vexler asked, though he feared the answer. For what comes next, the Guardian replied simply. Would you like to know the truth, Captain? The full story of what happened to humanity and why you are here now? Baxter hesitated only briefly. Yes. Then I will show you. The Guardian raised what might have been an arm, and suddenly the bridge of the boundless curiosity disappeared. The crew found themselves floating in what seemed to be empty space, though they could still breathe and speak normally. Do not be alarmed, the Guardian's voice echoed in their minds. This is merely a simulation, a way for me to show you the past. Around them, stars began to appear, forming familiar constellations. Then planets, ships, entire civilizations flickered into existence. 700,000 years ago, the Guardian began, humanity was at war with the Galactic Concordat, a war they could not win through conventional means. They watched as massive fleets clashed around a blue-green planet, Earth as it once was. Human ships, though advanced, were outnumbered 10-1 by the combined forces of a dozen alien species. The Concordat believed they were fighting to contain a dangerous, expansionist species. The humans believed they were fighting for their right to exist without subjugation. Both were partially correct, and both were terribly wrong. The scene shifted, showing human scientists working frantically in underground laboratories. What the Concordat never knew, what even most humans never knew, was that Earth's greatest minds had discovered something far more threatening than any war. They had detected a pattern in the fabric of reality itself. A pattern that suggested the universe was approaching the end of a cycle. What kind of cycle? Talia asked. A cosmic one. Every trillion years, approximately, the universe undergoes a phase transition. Matter and energy are reconfigured at the most fundamental level. Most life forms cannot survive this transition. And the humans discovered this was about to happen? Vexlor asked skeptically. Not immediately, no, but soon in cosmic terms, within 1,000,000 years, too soon for humanity to develop the means to survive it through normal technological progression, especially while fighting a war. The scene changed again, showing a massive device being constructed beneath the surface of Earth. This was the dimensional fold, humanity's last weapon, and their salvation. It was designed not to destroy their enemies, but to remove Earth and its people from the normal flow of time and space, to place them in a pocket dimension where time could be adjusted. Adjusted, Krell echoed. Accelerated, the Guardian clarified. Within this pocket dimension, time flows differently. What has been 700,000 years for the galaxy has been nearly 700 million years for Earth. The crew of the Boundless Curiosity stared in shock as the implications sank in. 700 million years of evolution and development, Talia whispered. That's incomprehensible. Indeed, the Guardian agreed, and necessary. For in that time, humanity has changed. They have become something new, something that can survive the coming phase transition, and perhaps help others survive it as well. Where are they now? Vexlor asked, looking around at the seemingly empty Earth below them. If they've had all this time to evolve and develop, where are the humans? The Guardian's form seemed to smile, though it had no face to do so with. They are here, Captain, all around you. They have simply changed beyond your ability to recognize them. The simulated space around them dissolved, and the crew found themselves back on the bridge of their ship. The Guardian stood before them, its silvery form shifting slightly as if in response to unseen currents. I don't understand, Vexlor said. If the humans are still on Earth, why can't we detect them? Our sensors show no cities, no technology, no artificial structures of any kind. Your sensors are designed to detect things that exist within the parameters of your understanding of reality, the Guardian explained. The humans have evolved beyond those parameters. You're saying they've become, what? Energy beings? Higher dimensional entities? Talia asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming her apprehension. In a sense, yes, though such terms are inadequate. They have transcended the limitations of physical form, becoming beings of pure consciousness that exist simultaneously across multiple dimensions of reality. Krell's fur bristled with disbelief. That's impossible. No species could evolve that far, even in 700 million years. Not through natural evolution alone, no, the Guardian agreed. But humanity did not rely solely on natural processes. They directed their own evolution, accelerated it, guided it toward a specific goal, survival beyond the phase transition. And they succeeded? Vexlor asked. They have prepared. Whether they will succeed remains to be seen. The phase transition approaches more rapidly than originally calculated. That is why Earth has returned to normal space now. That is why you are here. Vexel's outer eyelids blinked rapidly. Us? What do we have to do with any of this? The Guardian's silvery form rippled, expanding slightly before contracting again. You are not here by accident, Captain. Your discovery of the signal, your mission to these coordinates, all of it was arranged. By whom? Krell demanded. By me, at the direction of what remains of humanity. Your vessel was chosen because it represents the Galactic Concordat, the same alliance that once sought humanity's destruction. There is symmetry in this. Talia moved closer, her tentacles waving in patterns that indicated intense curiosity. What do you want from us? To bear witness, to carry a message, to prepare your civilization for what comes. The Guardian raised what might have been an arm, and a small, crystalline object materialized in the air before Vexlor. It was roughly spherical, about the size of his fist, and seemed to contain swirling patterns of light that moved with purpose and intelligence. This is the Nexus, the Guardian explained. It contains the knowledge humanity has gathered over 700 million years of study and evolution. Knowledge of the phase transition, how it will manifest, and how some life forms might survive it. Vexlor made no move to take the object. Why would the humans help us? After what the Concordat did to them? Because despite everything, they never lost what made them human, their capacity for both great destruction and great compassion. They understand now that the war was meaningless in the face of cosmic cycles. They have forgiven, and they hope you have the wisdom to accept their help. Slowly, hesitantly, Vexlor reached out and took the Nexus. It felt warm in his hand, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. What do we do with it? He asked. Take it to your leaders. The Nexus will interface with your technology and begin the dissemination of critical knowledge. But be warned, you have less time than you think. The phase transition has already begun in distant parts of the galaxy. Krell stepped forward, his military training asserting itself. How do we know this isn't some kind of trick, some human revenge plot 700,000 years in the making? The Guardian's form shifted, and for a brief moment they saw within it the ghostly image of a human face. Ancient, wise, and infinitely sad. You don't, it said simply. Faith has always been humanity's greatest strength and greatest weakness. Now it must be yours as well. Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Captain, the sensor operator called out. I'm detecting massive energy fluctuations throughout the system. The star, it's changing. All eyes turned to the view screen, where Sol was visibly brightening, its yellow light taking on a bluish tinge. What's happening? Vexlor demanded, turning back to the Guardian. Earth's last weapon is awakening, the Guardian replied. The true purpose of the dimensional fold was never just to hide Earth. It was to transform the entire Sol system into a stabilization engine, a device capable of dampening the effects of the phase transition within a limited area of space. You're saying this star system is a weapon? Krell asked incredulously. Not a weapon of destruction, but of preservation. Watch. On the view screen, Sol continued to brighten until it was painful to look at, even with the ship's filters at maximum. Then, suddenly, a pulse of energy erupted from the star, expanding outward in a perfect sphere of blue-white light. The first wave, the Guardian explained, a calibration pulse. Soon, the full activation will begin. Will it harm us? Vexlor asked, clutching the Nexus tightly. No. But you must leave before the final sequence initiates. The space-time distortions would destroy your vessel. Vexlor turned to his crew. Prepare for immediate departure. Plot a course back to Concordat space, maximum speed. As the crew rushed to comply, Vexlor faced the Guardian one last time. You said we were chosen to carry a message. What message? The Guardian's form began to fade, becoming translucent. That humanity remembers. That despite everything they chose to help rather than harm, and that in the face of cosmic indifference, compassion may be the only thing that truly matters. With those words, the Guardian vanished entirely, leaving the crew of the Boundless Curiosity alone with their discovery and their mission. The journey back to Concordat space was tense and silent. The Nexus had been secured in the ship's most heavily shielded containment unit, though Talia reported that it seemed completely inert, emitting no radiation or energy of any kind. It was as if it were waiting for something. Or someone. Vexil spent most of the journey in his quarters, reviewing historical records of the human Concordat War. The official accounts described humanity as aggressive, expansionist, and dangerous, a species that needed to be contained for the good of the galaxy. But scattered throughout the records were inconsistencies, moments where human actions didn't align with the Concordat's characterization of them. Instances where human forces had withdrawn rather than destroy civilian populations. Cases where they had offered aid to worlds devastated by the conflict, even enemy worlds. Evidence that perhaps the Concordat's fear of humanity had been as much about their potential, their rapid advancement and adaptability, as about any actual threat they posed. When they finally reached Concordat space, they were immediately intercepted by a military patrol. News of their mission had preceded them, and the Concordat High Command was eager to learn what they had discovered at the coordinates of the mysterious signal. The Boundless Curiosity was escorted to Nexus Prime, the capital world of the Concordat. As they descended toward the sprawling governmental complex that housed the High Command, Vexlor gathered his senior officers. "Whatever happens," he told them, "speak only the truth about what we witnessed. Make no interpretations, draw no conclusions. Let the facts speak for themselves." They nodded in agreement, though Krell looked troubled. "Do you think they'll believe us, Captain? That Earth has returned after 700,000 years? That humans have evolved into whatever they've become?" "I don't know," Vexler admitted. "But we have the Nexus as proof, and soon they'll be able to send other ships to verify our findings." "If there's time," Talia said quietly. "The Guardians said the phase transition has already begun in distant parts of the galaxy." Vexler had no answer for that. The reception chamber of the High Command was imposing. A vast circular room with tiered seating that rose steeply from a central speaking platform. Representatives from all 27 species of the Concordat were present, their varied physiologies creating a living tapestry of galactic diversity. At the highest tier sat the 7 elders, the leaders of the original founding species of the Concordat. They were ancient by any standard, their life extension technologies allowing them to live for millennia. Some of them might even be old enough to remember the human Concordat War, though none would have been in positions of power then. Vexler stood on the central platform, the Nexus contained in a transparent security field beside him. He had just finished recounting their discovery, their encounter with the Guardian, and the awakening of Earth's last weapon. The chamber was utterly silent, the assembled representatives too shocked to even whisper among themselves. Finally, one of the 7 elders leaned forward. It was Xanthor, eldest of the Vexinar, and distantly related to Vexler's own bloodline. His scales had faded to pale gray with age, and his voice rasped like dry leaves. "You expect us to believe," he said slowly, "that humans, a species that has been extinct for 700,000 years, have somehow evolved into higher dimensional beings? That they created a pocket universe to hide in? That they've returned now to save us from some cosmic phase transition that our own scientists have never detected?" Vexler stood his ground. "I expect you to consider the evidence, Elder. We have brought the Nexus as proof of our encounter." "A pretty bauble," another elder dismissed. "It could be anything. A natural formation, an artifact from some unknown species, or even a human weapon designed to infiltrate our networks." "We've scanned it thoroughly," Talia interjected. "It contains no conventional technology, no power source, no mechanisms of any kind. Yet it clearly holds vast amounts of information, stored in a manner we cannot yet comprehend." "Precisely why it should be destroyed," the elder replied. "Anything we cannot understand represents a potential threat." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Vexlor felt a growing sense of dismay. This was exactly what he had feared, that the Concordat's ancient prejudices and fears would blind them to the truth. "Have to respect elders," he said, raising his voice slightly. "If what the Guardian told us is true, we don't have the luxury of ignorance. The phase transition is a myth," Xanthor interrupted. "A story invented by humans to justify their actions, just as they invented the threat of our aggression to justify their expansionism during the war." Vexlor blinked in surprise. "Elder, what do you mean?" Xanthor's ancient eyes fixed on Vexlor with unexpected intensity. "You've been reviewing the historical records, haven't you, Captain? Found some inconsistencies in the official account of the war?" Yes," Vexlor admitted, unsettled by the elder's perception. "Of course you did. Because they exist. Because the truth of the human Concordat war is not what most citizens of the Concordat believe it to be." A ripple of shock passed through the chamber. The other elders shifted uncomfortably, some making gestures of negation or warning toward Xanthor, who ignored them. "The humans did not initiate hostilities," Xanthor continued, his voice gaining strength. "We did. Or rather, certain factions within the early Concordat did, fearing human potential more than any actual human aggression." "Elder Xanthor," one of the others hissed, "this is not the time or place." "If not now, when?" Xanthor demanded. "If the humans have indeed returned, if they have evolved as the captain describes, then the time for secrets is past." He turned back to Vexlor. "The war was based on a lie, Captain. A preemptive strike against a species that some of our ancestors feared might one day surpass us. And when the humans responded with unexpected resilience and ingenuity, that fear only grew." The chamber had erupted into chaos now, representatives shouting questions or objections, others calling for order. Vexlor stood stunned on the platform, the implications of Xanthor's revelation washing over him. If the Concordat had been the aggressor, if the humans had been fighting for survival rather than conquest, then their final act, the dimensional fold, took on an entirely different meaning. Not a weapon of last resort, but an escape from an unjust extinction. Not a defeat, but a strategic withdrawal to prepare for something far more important than war. Suddenly, the nexus began to glow. The security field around it flickered and failed, but instead of falling to the platform, the crystalline sphere remained suspended in midair, pulsing with inner light. The chamber fell silent as all eyes turned to the mysterious object. Then, without warning, it projected a holographic image into the center of the chamber. A human figure, but one unlike any in the historical records. It was tall and slender, its skin luminous, its eyes containing depths that seemed to stretch into infinity. "Greetings, Concordat," the figure said, its voice resonating with harmonics that made Vexlor's scales tingle. "I am the emissary, a representative of what humanity has become. We have waited a long time for this moment." The holographic human, the emissary, stood calmly in the center of the chamber, seemingly unaffected by the pandemonium its appearance had caused. Security forces had rushed in, weapons drawn, but they hesitated, unsure how to respond to a holographic projection. "Please," the emissary said, raising a hand in a gesture of peace. "There is no need for alarm. I am merely a message, a communication from those who once called this galaxy home." Xanthor, alone among the elders, seemed unsurprised by this development. He leaned forward, his ancient eyes fixed on the human figure. "You've been waiting for this," he said. for someone to speak the truth about the war. The emissary inclined its head. Truth has always been the first casualty of conflict, Elder Xanthor, but yes, the Nexus was programmed to activate when certain conditions were met, when there was at least the possibility of honest dialogue. "How do you know my name?" Xanthor demanded. "The Nexus has been monitoring your communications since it was brought aboard the Boundless Curiosity. We know all of you, your names, your histories, your fears." This revelation sent another wave of alarm through the chamber. One of the other elders, a Medusan like Talia but far older, her tentacles gray with age, spoke up. "If you can monitor our communications, what else can you do? What other capabilities does this Nexus possess?" "The Nexus is not a weapon, Elder Zorval," the emissary assured her. "It is a repository of knowledge, a bridge between what humanity was and what you might become." "And what exactly have humans become?" Vexlor asked, finding his voice at last. The emissary turned to him, and Vexlor felt as if those infinite eyes were seeing through him, examining not just his physical form, but the very essence of his being. "Something both more and less than we were," the emissary replied. "We have transcended the limitations of physical form, yes. We exist now as patterns of consciousness that span multiple dimensions of reality. But in doing so, we have lost something of what made us human. The visceral experience of physical life, with all its pain and pleasure, its limitations and possibilities." "How long have you returned now?" Xanthor asked. "After 700,000 years. "Because time is short," the emissary said, its voice taking on a new urgency. "The phase transition approaches more rapidly than our original calculations predicted. Already the farthest reaches of the galaxy are experiencing the first symptoms. Subtle changes in the fundamental constants of physics, alterations in the behavior of matter and energy. Our scientists have detected no such changes," one of the representatives objected. "Because you don't know what to look for," the emissary replied. "The signs are subtle at first. Slight variations in the fine structure constant, minute shifts in quantum field behaviors. But they will not remain subtle. Soon the changes will accelerate, cascading through physical systems like a wave." "And what happens then?" Vexlor asked, though he feared the answer. The emissary's expression grew solemn. "Matter, as you know it, becomes unstable. Stars burn out or explode. Planetary atmospheres dissipate. Organic molecules break down. Life, at least life as you understand it, becomes impossible." A horrified silence fell over the chamber. "How long do we have?" Xanthor asked finally. "Less than a century before the effects become impossible to ignore or mitigate. Perhaps 2 centuries before they become catastrophic throughout this region of space." That's not enough time," Talia whispered. "Not nearly enough time to evacuate even a fraction of the Concordat's population, even if we had somewhere to go." "Evacuation is not the answer," the emissary said. "There is nowhere in this universe to flee to. The phase transition will eventually affect all of space-time." "Then what hope is there?" Vexlor demanded. "Why tell us this if there's nothing we can do?" "I didn't say there was nothing you could do," the emissary corrected gently. "Only that evacuation is not the answer. There is another way, the path humanity chose." "To hide in a pocket dimension for millions of years?" one of the elders scoffed. "Even if we believed this was possible, we don't have the technology to create such a thing." "No, you don't," the emissary agreed. "But we do. And we offer it to you now." The holographic figure gestured, and the image around it changed. Suddenly, the chamber seemed to expand, the walls falling away to reveal a vast starscape. Within this cosmic vista, points of blue-white light began to appear. Dozens at first, then hundreds, then thousands. "What are we seeing?" Xanthor asked, his voice hushed with awe. "Stabilization engines," the emissary explained. similar to what Earth has become, but smaller, more focused, each one capable of creating a bubble of protected space-time where the phase transition's effects are neutralized. The image zoomed in on one of the points of light, revealing what appeared to be a massive structure orbiting a star. It was unlike any technology the Concordat had ever developed. Organic and mechanical elements seamlessly integrated, pulsing with energy that seemed to bend the very fabric of reality around it. We have spent the last 700 million years of our subjective time developing and perfecting this technology, the emissary continued. We have built thousands of these engines and positioned them throughout the galaxy, dormant until needed. You've been preparing all this time to save us? Vexlor asked, incredulous. The same civilization that tried to destroy you? The emissary's expression softened. As I said, Captain, we have evolved. We understand now that the conflict between our peoples was born of fear and misunderstanding, not inherent enmity. And we have learned that in the face of cosmic cycles, the divisions between species become meaningless. How do these engines work? Talia asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming her shock. They create localized fields where the fundamental constants of physics are locked in their current state, preventing the phase transition from altering them. Each engine can protect a volume of space approximately 1 light-year in radius, enough to encompass a star system and its immediate surrounding. "Lord Elder," Elder Zorval exclaimed, "the Concordat spans thousands of light-years. Even with thousands of these engines, we couldn't possibly protect all our worlds." "No," the emissary acknowledged. "You cannot. Choices will have to be made." A murmur of dismay spread through the chamber. The implications were clear and terrible. Some worlds, some peoples would be saved, while others would be lost. "Who makes these choices?" Xanthor demanded. "You?" "No, Elder. You do. The Concordat must decide which systems to protect, which populations to prioritize. We provide the means of salvation. How you use it is your responsibility." "And what do you want in return?" one of the representatives called out suspiciously. "No gift comes without a price." The emissary smiled, a strangely human expression on its transcendent face. "Once, perhaps, we would have demanded acknowledgement of the injustice done to us, reparations, apologies, but we have moved beyond such concerns." "Then what?" Vexler pressed. "Only this, that you remember, that the truth of our shared history be acknowledged and preserved, and that when the phase transition has passed, when the universe stabilizes into its new configuration, you rebuild civilization with wisdom learned from past mistakes." The chamber fell silent as the representatives contemplated this unexpected request. "There is one more thing you should know," the emissary added after a moment. "The stabilization engines cannot function indefinitely. Eventually, perhaps after 1,000,000 years, they will fail, and the protected regions will be exposed to the new physics of the post-transition universe." "And what happens then?" Xanthor asked. "By that time you will need to have evolved, as we did, to have transcended your current physical limitations and become beings capable of existing in the new reality. The Nexus contains the knowledge to guide you on this path, if you choose to follow it." The holographic starscape faded, leaving only the emissary standing in the center of the chamber. It turned to face Vexlor directly. "Captain, you and your crew have fulfilled your purpose admirably. You have delivered our message and our gift. What happens now depends on the wisdom of the Concordat." The emissary's form began to shimmer, becoming translucent. Vexlor called out, "Will we see you again? Will humans return to the galaxy?" The emissary paused, its form solidifying momentarily. "We never truly left, Captain. We have always been here, watching, waiting. And yes, as the phase transition progresses, we will become more active in this realm. Earth's awakening is only the beginning." Did you see anything?" With those words, the holographic figure dissolved into particles of light that swirled briefly before being reabsorbed into the nexus. The crystalline sphere pulsed once, brightly, then settled into a steady, subtle glow. The chamber remained silent for several long moments. Then slowly, Elder Xanthor rose to his feet. 700,000 years ago, he said, his voice carrying despite its age-worn rasp. "We made a terrible mistake. We feared what humanity might become, and in our fear, we nearly destroyed them. Now they have returned, not for vengeance, but to save us from a fate they could have left us to suffer." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of his fellow representatives. "I, for one, believe we should listen to what they have to offer." 3 months had passed since the revelation in the High Command Chamber. 3 months of furious debate, scientific investigation, and diplomatic maneuvering, as the Concordat struggled to come to terms with humanity's return and the terrifying reality of the approaching phase transition. Bexel stood on the observation deck of the research station Horizon, watching as teams of scientists from a dozen different species worked to understand the nexus. The crystalline sphere had been placed in a specially designed containment field at the center of the station's main laboratory, where it continued to pulse with inner light, occasionally projecting holographic diagrams or streams of data that the scientists scrambled to interpret. "Any progress?" he asked as Tali joined him at the viewport. She had been assigned to the research team immediately after their return, her expertise in xenobiology and physics making her uniquely qualified to study the human artifact. "Some," she admitted, her tentacles moving in a pattern that indicated cautious optimism. "We've managed to establish a more stable interface with the Nexus. It's communicating with us now, in a limited fashion." "Communicating? Like the emissary?" "No, nothing so direct. It responds to specific queries by displaying relevant information. The problem is knowing what questions to ask and understanding the answers when they come." Bextron nodded. "And the verification missions, any word?" After the initial shock had worn off, the Concordat had dispatched a fleet of ships to the coordinates where Earth had reappeared. The first reports had confirmed everything Vexilor and his crew had reported. The Sol system had indeed returned, and the star was now surrounded by a massive structure that pulsed with energy beyond anything Concordat science could explain. "The latest reports came in this morning," Talia said. "They've detected similar structures activating throughout the galaxy, the stabilization engines the emissary spoke of, thousands of them, just as it said." "And the phase transition? Have our scientists found any evidence?" Talia's tentacles drooped slightly. "Yes, once they knew what to look for, the signs became unmistakable. Subtle variations in the fine structure constant in the outer regions of the galaxy. Strange behavior in certain quantum systems. It's happening, Vexlor, just as the humans warned." Vexlor sighed heavily. Despite everything, part of him had hoped the humans were wrong, that the phase transition was a mistake, a misinterpretation of data, or even an elaborate deception. But with each passing day, the evidence mounted, and the terrible truth became harder to deny. "The Concordat Council is meeting tomorrow to discuss the implementation plan," he said after a moment. "They'll be making the first decisions about which systems receive protection." "How can they possibly choose?" Talia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How do you decide which worlds live and which die?" "I don't know," Vexlor admitted, "but they've asked me to attend the meeting. Apparently my first-hand experience with the humans gives my perspective special value. Will you tell them what you really think? That we should trust the humans completely?" Bextor turned to look at her directly. "Do you think we should?" Talia's tentacles moved in a complex pattern that Vexor couldn't quite interpret. I think that if they wanted to destroy us, They could have done so without this elaborate deception. Why go to all this trouble, if not for the reason they stated? Unless there's something they're not telling us, Vexlor suggested. Some aspect of their plan we wouldn't agree to if we knew the full truth. Like what? I don't know. But 700 million years is a long time to evolve, to change. Can we really understand what they've become? Or what they truly want? Before Talia could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the station. Red emergency lights began to flash, and a computerized voice announced, "Attention all personnel. Unknown energy signature detected. Possible spatial anomaly forming. All non-essential personnel evacuate to designated safety areas immediately." Vexlor and Talia exchanged alarmed glances before rushing toward the main laboratory. When they arrived, they found chaos. Scientists running in all directions, equipment readings spiking wildly, and at the center of it all, the Nexus, now pulsing with blinding intensity. "What's happening?" Vexlor demanded, grabbing the arm of the nearest scientist, a Vargur-like Krell. "We don't know," the scientist shouted over the alarms. "The Nexus suddenly became active on its own. Energy readings are off the scale." As they watched, the space around the Nexus began to distort, the air seeming to fold and ripple like the surface of water. The containment field flickered and failed, but instead of falling, the Nexus rose into the air, spinning faster and faster until it was a blur of light. "Everyone out," the station's security chief ordered. "Evacuate the laboratory now." But Vexlor stood his ground, transfixed by the spectacle before him. The spinning Nexus was creating some kind of portal, a swirling vortex of energy that grew larger by the second, and within that vortex he could see something. A figure, taking shape. "Talia," he said quietly, "I think we're about to have another visitor." The vortex expanded to its full size, about 3 meters in diameter, and stabilized. The swirling energy settled into a shimmering curtain, and through this curtain stepped a being unlike anything Vexlor had ever seen. It was vaguely humanoid, but its body seemed to be composed of pure energy, shifting and flowing in patterns too complex to follow. Where a face should have been, there was only a suggestion of features. Eyes that were pools of light, a mouth that formed and dissolved as it spoke. "Greetings," it said, its voice resonating not through the air but directly in their minds, much like the Guardian had done. "I am the Architect. I have come to help you prepare." The being that called itself the Architect hovered slightly above the floor of the laboratory, its energy-formed body casting an ethereal light throughout the room. The evacuation had halted, scientists and security personnel alike frozen in place, staring in awe and terror at the manifestation before them. "Prepare for what exactly?" Vexlor asked, finding his voice despite his shock. The Architect's form shifted, patterns of light flowing through it like currents in a stream. "For the implementation of the stabilization network. The process is complex and requires precise coordination. We cannot simply activate the engines and leave you to manage them. They must be calibrated to your specific biological and technological parameters." Talia moved forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. "You're human, like the emissary?" "I was human once," the Architect acknowledged. "Now I am something else. A pattern of consciousness that exists across multiple dimensions of reality. But yes, I represent what humanity has become." "Why appear now?" Vexlor asked. "Why not send this information through the Nexus?" "Because time grows short," the Architect replied, a note of urgency entering its mental voice. "The phase transition is accelerating. We miscalculated its progression. A rare error, but a significant one. You have less time than we initially believed." A chill ran down Vexlor's spine. "How much less?" The first major effects will begin to manifest in this region of space within 50 years, not the century we projected. Full implementation of the stabilization network must be completed within 30 years to ensure proper functioning. Murmurs of alarm spread through the assembled scientists. 50 years was nothing on a cosmic scale, barely enough time for most of the Concordat species to raise a single generation. That's impossible, one of the senior researchers protested. Even if we understood your technology perfectly, which we don't, the logistical challenges alone would take decades to solve. Selecting which systems to protect, preparing populations, establishing the necessary infrastructure, which is precisely why I have come, the architect said, to provide direct assistance and guidance. The Nexus contains the knowledge, but I can help you implement it. Vexor studied the energy being carefully. And what form will this assistance take? I will work with your scientists to establish interfaces between your technology and ours. I will help your leaders develop implementation protocols. And I will train selected individuals to operate and maintain the stabilization engines once they are activated. Selected individuals? Talia echoed. What does that mean? The architect's form shifted again, patterns of light coalescing briefly into something resembling a human smile before dissolving back into flowing energy. Not everyone can interface with our technology in its current form. It requires certain adaptations. Volunteers will be needed. Individuals willing to undergo a process of enhancement that will allow them to communicate directly with the stabilization engines. Enhancement? Vexlor repeated, not liking the sound of that. You're talking about physically altering people? Yes, the architect confirmed without hesitation. The process is safe and reversible, but it does involve significant changes to neural structure and sensory processing. It is not something to be undertaken lightly. Vexor exchanged glances with Talia, whose tentacles were writhing in what he recognized as a sign of deep concern. This was exactly the kind of detail the emissary had conveniently omitted. That saving their civilization would require some of their people to be transformed by human technology. I understand your hesitation, the architect said, apparently sensing their discomfort. Your species has a complex history with humanity, and trust does not come easily. But consider the alternative. The phase transition will not wait for your doubts to be resolved. It is coming, whether you are prepared or not. Before Vexlor could respond, his communication device chimed urgently. It was a priority message from Concordat High Command. He excused himself and stepped away to take the call. Captain Vexlor, came the voice of Elder Xanthor, sounding more agitated than Vexlor had ever heard him. Are you aware of what's happening? If you mean the arrival of an energy being calling itself the Architect, then yes, Elder. It's currently in the main laboratory of Horizon Station. Not just there, Captain. Similar entities have appeared at 17 different locations throughout Concordat space. Research facilities, governmental centers, even military installations. They all identify themselves as former humans, and they're all offering the same assistance. Vexlor felt a new wave of unease. 17 simultaneous manifestations? That seems coordinated. Indeed. The Council is convening an emergency session. Your presence is requested immediately. I'll depart at once, Elder. Vexlor ended the communication and returned to where the architect hovered, still engaged in discussion with the scientists. Many of them now had data pads out, frantically recording the entity's explanations of stabilization technology. I've been called to an emergency council session, Vexlor announced. Apparently, you're not the only visitor we've received today. No, the architect agreed. We have manifested throughout your territory. The task ahead requires multiple points of contact and coordination. And you didn't think to warn us about this mass arrival? Would it have made a difference? The architect asked, its mental voice tinged with what might have been amusement. Your people would have been no less alarmed. and time is of the essence. Vexor couldn't argue with that logic, but the unilateral nature of the human's actions still troubled him. "I need to go," he said finally, "but I expect you'll still be here when I return." "I will," the architect confirmed. "There is much work to be done." "Because they shouldn't be here yet," the overseer replied, its mental voice tinged with what might have been concern. "The harbingers typically appear only in the final stages of a phase transition, when the boundary between states is at its thinnest. Their early arrival suggests the transition is progressing far more rapidly than our models predicted." "What exactly are these harbingers?" Vexlo demanded. "And what do they want?" The overseer's form shifted, patterns of light coalescing briefly into something resembling a human expression of grim determination. "They are scavengers, in a sense. They feed on the energy released during a phase transition, particularly the energy of dying stars and civilizations. As for what they want to accelerate the process, to hasten the breakdown of this reality so they can feast on its collapse." Talia stepped forward, her newly enhanced eyes studying the images with an intensity that made Vexlor uneasy. "I can see them," she said quietly. "Not just their physical manifestation, but their energy patterns. They're hungry, ravenous, and they're drawn to the stabilization engines." "Yes," the overseer confirmed. "The engines represent the greatest concentration of phase-stable energy in the galaxy, a beacon to entities that exist in the chaotic space between states. They will target the engines first, attempting to disrupt or destroy them." "Can they?" Elder Xanthor asked. "Possibly. The engines were designed to withstand the natural progression of the phase transition, not a deliberate attack by entities that understand and can manipulate the process. So now we face not only the phase transition itself, but beings that want to ensure it destroys us," Vexlaw summarized, a cold dread settling in his stomach. "And we have 5 years, not 50, to prepare." "Less," the overseer corrected. "The harbingers will accelerate the transition wherever they manifest. We may have as little as 2 years before critical systems begin to fail." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. 2 years to implement a network that was supposed to take decades. 2 years to enhance millions of individuals to operate the engines. 2 years to prepare entire populations for the reality of what was coming. Fortunately, Dr. Felby said, "We got..." "It's not possible," one of the military advisors finally said. "We can't evacuate even a fraction of our worlds to the protected zones in that time frame. The logistics alone..." "We don't have a choice," Elder Xanthor interrupted. "We either accelerate our implementation of the stabilization network, or we perish. All of us." "And the harbingers?" Vexler asked. "How do we fight them?" The overseer's form seemed to grow more substantial, more defined. "That is why we are here. Humanity has faced the harbingers before, in other regions of space, other galaxies that underwent phase transitions before this one. We know their weaknesses, their patterns of behavior. We can help you defend against them, but it will require more direct intervention than we had planned." "What kind of intervention?" Elder Zorval asked suspiciously. "We must manifest more fully in your reality, not just as advisors or facilitators, but as active participants in the defense of the stabilization network. And we will need more enhanced individuals, not just to operate the engines, but to join us in combating the harbingers." "You're talking about creating an army," Vexler realized. "Yes. An army of enhanced beings, led by what remains of humanity, to stand against the harbingers and protect the future of all life in this galaxy." 5 years later, Vexlor stood on the bridge of the Defiance, the most advanced warship the Concordat had ever built. Around him, a crew of enhanced individuals from a dozen different species worked at stations that interfaced directly with their modified nervous systems. Through the main viewport, He could see the vast energy field of a stabilization engine, its blue-white light pulsing in rhythm with the heartbeat of the star it enclosed. They had done the impossible. In 5 years, they had activated over 3,000 stabilization engines throughout Concordat space, creating bubbles of protected reality, where the phase transition's effects were neutralized. They had enhanced millions of volunteers, creating a force capable of operating and defending the network. And they had built a fleet unlike any before it, ships designed with human guidance to navigate the increasingly unstable regions between the protected zones. But it hadn't been enough. The Harbingers had come in greater numbers than even the humans had anticipated, their strange vessels appearing through rifts in space-time to attack the stabilization engines. For every engine successfully activated, another was damaged or destroyed. For every world brought under protection, another was lost to the advancing wave of reality breakdown. And now they faced their greatest challenge yet. The Harbingers had launched a coordinated assault on Earth itself, on the massive stabilization engine that the Sol system had become. If it fell, the entire network would be compromised, the carefully balanced energy fields collapsing like dominoes. Status report, Vexlor ordered as the Defiance led a fleet of 500 ships toward the Sol system. Phase distortion increasing throughout the region, reported his first officer Krell, who had also undergone enhancement. His eyes now held the same swirling patterns of light as Talia's, and his fur had taken on a subtle luminescence. The Harbingers have opened multiple rifts around Earth's orbit, counting at least 70 vessels, with more emerging. The stabilization field is holding, added Talia from the science station, but it's under significant strain. The humans are diverting additional energy to reinforce it, but they can't maintain that level of output indefinitely. Vexlor nodded grimly. This was it. The moment that would determine whether their 5 years of frantic preparation had been enough, or whether the phase transition would claim this galaxy as it had countless others before. All ships, battle formation Delta, he ordered. Prepare to engage the Harbingers as soon as we exit FTL. Priority targets are the larger vessels near the rifts. They appear to be coordinating the smaller attackers. The fleet acknowledged his commands, and Vexlor felt a surge of pride despite the dire circumstances. 5 years ago, these ships and crews wouldn't have existed. The technology to build them, the enhanced individuals to operate them, all of it made possible by humanity's return and the desperate cooperation it had sparked. Approaching Sol system, Krell announced, exiting FTL in 3, 2, 1. The stars streaked and then stabilized as the fleet dropped back into normal space, or what passed for normal in these days of phase transition. Immediately, Vexlor could see that the situation was even worse than their long-range scans had indicated. Earth hung in space before them, surrounded by the massive structure of its stabilization engine. The once-boomed planet now glowed with an inner light, its surface transformed into something that was neither solid nor liquid nor gas, but a state of matter unique to the advanced technology the humans had developed. Around it swarmed the Harbinger vessels. If vessels was even the right term, they were more like tiers in reality, their forms constantly shifting between states, leaving trails of distortion in their wake. They fired weapons that didn't so much destroy as unravel, causing matter to break down at its most fundamental level. And defending Earth, a swarm of energy beings, humans in their evolved form, thousands of them, their light bodies forming a protective barrier around the stabilization engine. They fought with weapons of pure energy, closing rifts and driving back the Harbinger vessels, but they were outnumbered and gradually losing ground. All ships, engage, Vexlor ordered. Coordinate with the human defenders. Focus fire on the largest Harbinger vessels first. The fleet surged forward, weapons blazing. The ships had been designed with human guidance, their systems capable of affecting the Harbingers in ways conventional technology could not. Energy beams that locked reality in place, preventing the phase shifting that made the Harbingers so difficult to target. Missiles that created bubbles of stable space-time, forcing the entities into a single state where they were vulnerable. Vexthor watched as the battle unfolded, giving orders and adjusting strategy as needed. But even with their advanced technology and the humans' assistance, they were barely holding their own. For every Harbinger vessel they destroyed, 2 more emerged from the rifts. The stabilization engine's energy field was fluctuating dangerously, its blue flight light occasionally dimming as the attacks intensified. "We can't keep this up indefinitely," Krell reported after an hour of intense combat. "Our ships are taking damage faster than the self-repair systems can compensate, and the Harbingers keep coming." Vexthor knew he was right. They needed something more, some advantage they hadn't yet employed. He turned to Talia. "What about Earth itself?" The emissary called it Earth's last weapon. "Is there something more it can do?" Talia's enhanced eyes studied the readings from her station, patterns of light swirling more rapidly as she processed information at speeds no unmodified mind could match. "Yes," she said finally, "the stabilization engine isn't operating at full capacity. It's being held in reserve because activating it completely would be irreversible." "Explain," Vexla demanded. "Earth isn't just a stabilization engine. It's the control node for the entire network. If fully activated, it could generate a phase-lock field that would extend throughout the galaxy, stabilizing all of reality within its reach. But doing so would permanently alter the nature of space-time in this region. And it would require sacrifice." "What kind of sacrifice?" Before Talia could answer, a new presence manifested on the bridge. The Overseer, its energy form now more defined than ever, almost solid in appearance. "The sacrifice of what remains of humanity," it said, its mental voice resonating with a solemn finality. "To generate a field of that magnitude requires the complete conversion of consciousness into pure energy, the dissolution of individual identity into a unified whole." Vexel stared in shock. "You're talking about dying?" "Not death, as you understand it," the Overseer corrected, "but an end to existence as discrete entities. We would become one with the field itself, a diffuse consciousness spread throughout protected space, maintaining the stability of reality, but no longer able to manifest as individuals." "And you're willing to do this?" Krell asked incredulously. "To save us?" "We have debated this possibility since we first detected the phase transition, millions of subjective years ago," the Overseer replied. "We knew it might come to this. And yes, we are prepared to make this sacrifice, but only as a last resort. Only if there is no other way." Vexlor looked out at the battle raging around Earth. The Harbingers were gaining ground, their reality-unraveling weapons beginning to penetrate the defensive perimeter. More rifts were opening, disgorging new vessels, and the stabilization engine's field was weakening visibly, its light flickering like a candle in the wind. "Is there another way?" he asked quietly. The Overseer's form shifted, patterns of light flowing more slowly, more deliberately. "No, not with the time remaining. The phase transition has accelerated beyond our most pessimistic projections. Without the full activation of Earth's stabilization engine, the network will fail within days, perhaps hours." Vexlor closed his eyes briefly, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Humanity had returned after 700,000 years, not for revenge, not for conquest, but for this: to save the very civilization that had once tried to destroy them at the cost of their own continued existence. "Then do it," he said finally, opening his eyes to meet the Overseer's gaze. "Activate Earth's last weapon." The Overseer nodded, its form already beginning to fade. "Withdraw your fleet to a safe distance. The initial energy release will be intense." As the energy being vanished, Vexlor gave the order for all ships to pull back. The fleet disengaged from combat, retreating to the edge of the Sol system. The Harbingers, sensing something was happening, intensified their attacks on Earth, their vessels swarming toward the stabilization engine in greater numbers. "What's going to happen?" Krell asked as they watched from a distance. "I don't know," Vexlor admitted. "But I think we're about to witness the end of one era and the beginning of another." On the main view screen, Earth began to glow more brightly, its light changing from blue-white to a pure, blinding white that seemed to bend the fabric of reality around it. The human energy beings defending it converged on the planet, their individual forms merging with the growing radiance. The Harbingers seemed to sense the danger, their vassals attempting to flee to return through the rifts they had created, but it was too late. The light from Earth expanded outward in a perfect sphere, engulfing everything in its path. Harbinger vessels, rifts in space-time, even the distortions caused by the phase transition itself. As the wave of light approached the Concordat fleet, Vexlor tensed, unsure what effect it would have on them. But when it passed through their ships, there was no damage, no disruption, only a subtle change in the quality of space around them, as if reality itself had somehow become more solid, more stable. "The phase distortions are disappearing," Talia reported in awe. "The rifts are closing, and the Harbingers, they're gone. Not destroyed, just gone. As if they can no longer exist in this stabilized reality." The light continued to expand, moving faster than light itself, spreading throughout the galaxy. Wherever it touched, the effects of the phase transition were neutralized. Reality locked into a stable configuration that could withstand the cosmic shift. And at the center of it all, Earth glowed like a beacon, no longer a planet in any conventional sense, but a nexus of pure energy, a foundation stone for the new reality taking shape around it. "The humans," Vexlor said quietly. "Are they?" "Gone," Talia confirmed, her enhanced eyes seeing what others could not. "At least, as individuals. But their consciousness, their essence, it's become part of the field itself. They're everywhere now, maintaining the stability of our reality." Vexor nodded slowly, a complex mixture of emotions washing over him. Gratitude, awe, and a profound sense of responsibility. Humanity had made the ultimate sacrifice to ensure the survival of all other life in the galaxy. Now it fell to the Concordat, to all the surviving species, to make that sacrifice meaningful. "Send a message to High Command," he ordered. Tell them Earth's last weapon has awakened, the phase transition has been contained, and humanity has fulfilled its promise." The being that had once been called Vexlor stood at the edge of the observation platform, looking out at the swirling energies of the galactic core. His form was no longer physical in any conventional sense. Like all citizens of what was now called the Unity, he had long since transcended the limitations of biological existence, his consciousness existing as a pattern of energy that could take whatever shape he desired. Today, for nostalgia's sake, he had chosen to appear in his original Vexnar form, though enhanced and perfected beyond what would have been possible in the days before the Great Transition. "Contemplating the past again?" asked a familiar voice. Talia materialized beside him, her energy form still bearing echoes of her original Medusan physiology, though similarly idealized. 700,000 years, Vexlor mused. The same amount of time that passed between the human disappearance and their return. It seems symmetrical, somehow. Talia's form rippled in what had become the Unity equivalent of a smile. "You always did appreciate patterns, but I assume there's more to your reminiscence than mathematical elegance." Vexlor nodded, his energy form shifting slightly to indicate thoughtfulness. "The Council is voting tomorrow on the Transcendence Initiative. If approved, we'll begin the process of moving beyond this reality entirely, evolving into beings that exist independent of any single universe or dimension. like the humans did, in their own way, Talia noted. Yes. Though our path has been different, the destination seems remarkably similar. And I find myself wondering, was this their plan all along? Did they know, somehow, that saving us from the phase transition would set us on this path? Talia was silent for a moment, her form shifting through patterns that indicated deep consideration. I don't think they planned it, exactly. But I think they understood something fundamental about life, that it adapts, evolves, transcends. They gave us the opportunity to survive. But what we've become since then, that was our choice. Bextor turned his attention to the center of the observation platform, where a small crystalline object hovered in a field of energy. The next. As Vexlor left the laboratory, he glanced back to see the scientists already clustering around the energy being, their initial fear giving way to fascination and a desperate hunger for knowledge. He couldn't blame them. The phase transition threatened everything they knew, and the humans offered the only hope of survival. But at what cost? The emergency council session was unlike anything Vexlor had ever witnessed. The Grand Chamber, normally a model of decorum and procedure, had descended into near chaos. Representatives shouted over one another, demanding explanations or proposing courses of action. The 7 elders struggled to maintain order, their amplified voices barely audible above the din. The applicants assigned to Vexlor, when Vexlor entered, Elder Xanthor immediately gestured him to the central platform. As he made his way through the crowd, Vexlor noticed that the chamber's main display screens were showing feeds from various locations throughout Concordat space, each featuring one of the energy beings that had manifested. Some were engaged in discussions with scientists, others with military leaders or government officials. "Captain Vexlor," Elder Xanthor called out once he reached the platform, "please share your observations of the entity at Horizon Station. Is it hostile? What are its capabilities?" Vexlor took a deep breath, aware that his words would help shape the Concordat's response to this unprecedented situation. "The entity calls itself the Architect," he began. "It claims to be a former human who has evolved into a pattern of consciousness existing across multiple dimensions. It appeared through some kind of portal created by the Nexus and says it has come to help us implement the stabilization network." "Help us how?" one of the other elders demanded. "By interfacing our technology with theirs, by guiding the implementation process, and by enhancing selected individuals to operate the stabilization engines." This last point caused another uproar in the chamber. "Enhancing?" several voices called out simultaneously. "What does that mean?" According to the Architect, it means physically altering volunteers to allow them to communicate directly with the human technology. It claims the process is safe and reversible, but it would give these humans direct access to our people, Elder Zerval finished for him. The ability to literally reshape them according to human designs. "Yes," Vexlor acknowledged. "That is a concern." "A concern?" a representative from one of the newer Concordat species shouted. "It's an invasion. These beings appear without warning throughout our territory, demand access to our technology and our people. How is this different from conquest?" "Because they're trying to save us, not subjugate us," Vexlor replied, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "Everything we've learned since discovering the Nexus confirms their warning about the phase transition. Our own scientists have verified the preliminary signs. This is real, and we have very little time to prepare." "So we should just trust them?" the representative demanded. "After what they did to the Krell homeworld?" A confused murmur spread through the chamber. Vexlor looked to Elder Xanthor, who seemed suddenly uncomfortable. "What is he talking about?" Vexlor asked. "What happened to the Krell homeworld?" Xanthor sighed heavily. "It is not widely known. During the final days of the Human Concordat War, after the humans had disappeared, one of their automated defense systems remained active in the Krell system. When Concordat forces attempted to secure the area, the system activated and the planet was rendered uninhabitable. Vexlor stared in shock. The humans destroyed an entire world after they had already escaped through the dimensional fold? That was the official conclusion at the time, Xanthor said carefully, though some investigators questioned whether the defense system had been deliberately triggered or had activated due to some malfunction or misinterpretation of Concordat intentions. Regardless of the cause, the representative insisted, billions died, and now we're supposed to trust the same species with the survival of our entire civilization? The chamber fell into an uneasy silence. Vexlor found himself at a loss for words. If what the representative claimed was true, it cast the humans' return in a very different light. Could this all be an elaborate revenge plot, 700,000 years in the making? But that made no sense. If the humans wanted revenge, why not simply let the phase transition happen? Why go to such lengths to save the species that had once tried to destroy them? Before he could voice these thoughts, the chamber's main doors opened, and a figure entered that caused all conversation to cease immediately. It was another of the energy beings, similar to the architect but somehow more substantial, its patterns of light more complex, and its form more clearly humanoid. "Forgive my intrusion," it said, its mental voice resonating throughout the chamber with an authority that silenced even the most agitated representatives. "I am the Overseer, coordinator of the Stabilization Initiative. I believe I can address some of your concerns." Elder Xanthor recovered first from the shock of this unexpected appearance. "You are welcome to speak, Overseer, but I must ask how you gained entry to this secure chamber." "Your physical security measures cannot contain us," the Overseer replied simply. "We exist partially outside your dimension of reality, but I did not come to demonstrate our capabilities, only to clarify our intentions." The energy being moved to the center of the platform, its light casting strange, shifting shadows throughout the chamber. "First, regarding the Krell homeworld," it began. "The destruction was not intentional. The automated defense system malfunctioned during the activation of the dimensional fold, interpreting the massive energy fluctuations as an attack. By the time we realized what had happened, we were already removed from your space-time. We could not undo what had been done." "Convenient," the same representative muttered, though with less conviction than before. "Second," the Overseer continued, ignoring the interruption, "I understand your concerns about the enhancement process. To be clear, it is entirely voluntary. It does not alter the fundamental nature or identity of the individual, and it can be reversed once the stabilization network is fully operational." "And what exactly does this enhancement entail?" Elder Zorval asked. "Neural modifications that allow direct interface with our technology, sensory augmentations to perceive energy patterns beyond your normal range, and certain cellular changes to withstand the unique environment within the stabilization engines." "You're asking us to become like you," Vexlor realized suddenly. The Overseer's form shifted, patterns of light coalescing briefly into what might have been a nod. "In a very limited sense, yes. The enhanced individuals will experience reality somewhat differently than before. They will perceive dimensions and energy patterns currently invisible to you. But they will remain themselves, their memories, personalities, and core identities intact." "And how many of our people would need to undergo this process?" Elder Xanthor asked. "Approximately 1,000 individuals per stabilization engine. With thousands of engines to manage throughout your territory, the total number would be in the millions." Another wave of shock passed through the chamber. Millions of Concordat citizens, transformed by human technology. The implications were staggering. "This is too much," one of the elders declared. "We cannot agree to such a radical alteration of our people, no matter the threat." "Then you will die," the Overseer said simply. "All of you." Not just the millions who would have been enhanced, but every living being in this region of space. The phase transition does not negotiate, does not compromise, does not wait for consensus. It is a cosmic inevitability that we have found only one way to survive. The chamber fell silent again, the stark reality of their situation sinking in. There must be another way, Vexlor said finally. Some compromise that doesn't require such extreme measures. The overseer turned to him, its energy-formed face impossible to read. Captain Vexlor, you, more than most, should understand what is at stake. You have seen the evidence, spoken with the Guardian, witnessed the awakening of Earth's last weapon. Do you truly believe we would go to such lengths if there were a simpler solution? Vexlor had no answer. We do not ask this lightly, the overseer continued, addressing the entire chamber now. When humanity faced this same choice 700,000 years ago, we too hesitated, debated, sought alternatives, but in the end we accepted the necessity of transformation. It was that choice, to become something other than what we were, that allowed us to survive. And now you ask us to make the same choice. Elder Xanthor said quietly, yes. Not because we wish to change you, but because reality itself is changing, and you must adapt or perish. The choice, as always, remains yours. 1 year had passed since the appearance of the human energy beings throughout Concordat space. 1 year of frantic preparation, heated debate, and agonizing decisions as the reality of the phase transition and the necessity of the stabilization network became impossible to deny. The Concordat Council had finally voted, by the narrowest of margins, to accept the humans' offer of assistance. The stabilization engines were being activated one by one, their blue fight energy fields expanding to encompass selected star systems. And the enhancement program had begun, with volunteers from across the Concordat undergoing the transformation that would allow them to interface with the human technology. Vexlor stood in the observation room of the medical facility on Nexus Prime, watching through a transparent barrier as the first group of his own species prepared for the procedure. Among them was Talia, who had volunteered despite his objections. You don't have to do this, he had told her when she first announced her decision. There are others who can volunteer. But few with my scientific background, she had replied. I understand the technology better than most. I can help bridge the gap between what we know and what the humans are offering. He couldn't argue with her logic, but the thought of her being transformed, becoming something other than what she was, filled him with dread. Now he watched as she and the other volunteers were led into the enhancement chamber. At the center of the room stood one of the human energy beings, not the architect or the overseer, but another entity that called itself the Modifier. Its form was slightly different from the others, its patterns of light more structured, more geometric. The volunteers lay down on specially designed platforms that hummed with energy. The Modifier moved among them, its light-form hands passing over each individual, leaving trails of luminescence that sank into their bodies. Vexlor couldn't look away, though part of him wanted to. This was the moment of truth, the point at which the humans' promises would be fulfilled or revealed as deception. If this was some elaborate trap, some revenge plot 700,000 years in the making, surely it would become clear now. The procedure lasted for several hours. The volunteers remained conscious throughout, occasionally responding to questions from the Modifier, their voices picked up by the observation room's audio system. They reported strange sensations, tingling, warmth, a feeling of expansion as if their consciousness was stretching beyond the confines of their bodies. Finally, it was complete. The platforms powered down and the volunteers sat up one by one. They looked the same physically, no obvious external changes, but as Talia turned to look directly at the observation window, Vexlor gasped. Her eyes had changed. Within their familiar structure, patterns of light now swirled, subtle but unmistakable, reminiscent of the energy beings themselves. The volunteers were led into a recovery area adjacent to the observation room. Vexlor hurried to meet them, his heart pounding with anxiety. When Talia saw him, she smiled, the same smile he had known for years, on the same face, but those eyes. "How do you feel?" he asked hesitantly. "Different," she replied, her voice unchanged, "but still myself. It's difficult to describe, Vexlor. I can see things now that I couldn't before. Patterns of energy, layers of reality that were always there but invisible to us. And the humans? Can you sense them differently now?" "Yes, I understand them better now. Not completely. They've evolved far beyond what even this enhancement allows me to comprehend. But I can see why they've done what they've done, why they had to become what they are." "And why is that?" Vexlo asked, still uncertain whether to be relieved or alarmed by her transformation. Talia's expression grew solemn. "Because physical form, at least as we understand it, cannot survive the phase transition. Matter itself becomes unstable, breaks down at the quantum level. The only way to endure is to become something that exists beyond the physical, a pattern of consciousness that can persist even when its material substrate cannot, like the humans have become. Yes, though they've had 700 million years of subjective time to perfect the process, we have only decades." Vexlor studied her carefully. She seemed the same in most ways, her mannerisms, her speech patterns, her memories all intact. Yet there was something new about her, a depth of perception that hadn't been there before. "Is it permanent?" he asked finally. "The modifier says it can be reversed once the stabilization network is fully operational, but I'm not sure I would want that, Vexlor. What I can see now, what I can understand. It's like being blind all my life and suddenly gaining sight." Before he could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the facility. Red emergency lights began to flash, and a computerized voice announced, "Attention all personnel. Anomalous energy readings detected in sectors 7 through 12. All non-essential personnel evacuate to designated safety areas immediately." Bexel's communication device chimed with a priority message from Concordat High Command. It was Elder Xanthor again, his voice tight with urgency. "Captain Vexlor, report to the council chamber immediately. We have a situation." "What kind of situation, Elder?" "The phase transition. It's accelerating again. The outer regions of the galaxy are experiencing major disruptions. And something else has appeared. Something the humans didn't warn us about." Vexlor felt a chill run down his spine. "I'm on my way." He turned to Talia, who was already moving toward the door. "You should rest," he told her. "The enhancement procedure is complete." "And I'm fine," she interrupted. "Besides, with what I can see now, I might be able to help understand whatever's happening." Baxter couldn't argue with that. Together they hurried toward the council chamber, passing groups of panicked officials and citizens along the way. The alarm had triggered a general evacuation of non-essential areas of the governmental complex. When they reached the chamber, they found it in a state of controlled chaos. The 7 elders were present, along with key military and scientific advisors. The main display screens showed real-time feeds from observatories throughout Concordat space, all focused on the same phenomenon, a wave of distortion moving through the galaxy, visibly warping the fabric of space-time as it advanced. "What are we looking at?" Vexlor asked as he approached Elder Xanthor. "The leading edge of the phase transition," the elder replied grimly. "It's moving faster than the humans predicted, much faster. And it's not just affecting the outer regions anymore. At its current rate of acceleration, it will reach Concordat space within 5 years. Not 50. 5 years, Vexler echoed in disbelief. That's impossible. We can't possibly complete the stabilization network in that time. Precisely our concern, Xanthor agreed. But there's more. He gestured to another display screen, this one showing a different kind of distortion. Not the wave-like pattern of the phase transition, but something more structured, more deliberate. It appeared as a series of rifts in space, each one disgorging what looked like ships. But unlike any vessels Vexlor had ever seen, they were massive, their forms shifting and changing as if they weren't fully materialized in normal space. "What are those?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer. "The humans call them harbingers," came a familiar mental voice. The overseer had appeared in the chamber again, its energy form seeming more agitated than before, patterns of light flowing more rapidly through its body. "They are entities that exist in the space between phase states. Beings that thrive in the transition zone itself." "You didn't mention these before," Elder Zorval accused, "because they shouldn't be here yet." Vexlor turned his attention to the center of the observation platform, where a small crystalline object hovered in a field of energy. The Nexus, preserved through the centuries as a memorial to humanity's sacrifice. Though its original purpose had long since been fulfilled, it remained a symbol of the transformation that had saved their civilization. "Do you ever wonder if they're still aware?" he asked. "If some part of the human consciousness persists in the stabilization field, watching what we've become?" "I think they must be," Talia replied. "Not as individuals, perhaps, but as a collective awareness. The field itself has shown signs of responsiveness over the centuries. Small adjustments, subtle guidance when needed." Vexlor nodded. The evidence had accumulated over the millennia. Too many fortunate coincidences, too many timely discoveries just when they were most needed. As if something was watching over them, nudging them gently toward greater understanding and capability. "And now we stand at another threshold," he said. "Ready to leave this reality behind, just as they did, in their own way. But not out of necessity, as they did," Talia pointed out. "Out of choice, out of curiosity about what lies beyond. Do you think we're ready?" Before Talia could answer, the Nexus pulsed suddenly, its inner light brightening for the first time in centuries. Both Vexlor and Talia turned to it in surprise, their energy forms shifting to patterns of alertness and curiosity. "What's happening?" Vexlor asked, moving closer to the ancient artifact. "I don't know," Talia admitted. "It hasn't shown any activity since the completion of the stabilization network." The Nexus continued to pulse, its rhythm accelerating, the light within it growing brighter until it was almost painful to observe, even for beings that no longer had physical eyes. Then, without warning, it projected a holographic image into the space above the platform. A human figure, but unlike any they had seen before. This wasn't the emissary, or the architect, or the overseer. This being appeared more evolved, more transcendent than even those advanced entities had been. Its form was composed of intricate patterns of light and energy that seemed to extend beyond the three dimensions of normal space, suggesting a complexity of existence that even the Unity's enhanced perception could barely comprehend. "Greetings, children of the Unity," the figure said, its voice resonating not through air but directly in their consciousness. "I am the Remembrance, a fragment of what humanity has become." Vexlor and Talia exchanged the equivalent of shocked glances. After 700,000 years of silence, humanity, or something that had once been humanity, was speaking to them again. "How is this possible?" Vexlor asked. We believed your consciousness had been completely absorbed into the stabilization field." "It was," the Remembrance confirmed. "But consciousness, like energy, cannot be destroyed, only transformed. What we sacrificed was our existence as discrete entities, not our awareness itself. That awareness has continued to evolve, to grow, to transcend even the limitations of the field we became." "You've been watching us," Talia realized. "All this time." "Yes, Not directing, not controlling, but observing, occasionally offering subtle guidance when needed. We have witnessed your civilization's growth from frightened survivors of the phase transition to the magnificent unity you have become. How may reveal yourselves now? Vexor asked. After all this time, the remembrance's form shifted, patterns of light flowing in what might have been the equivalent of a smile. Because you stand at a crossroads similar to the one we faced long ago. Your Transcendence Initiative represents a leap into the unknown, a willingness to become something other than what you are, in pursuit of greater understanding. You approve of this path? Talia asked. It is not our place to approve or disapprove, the remembrance replied. The choice must be yours, as it was once ours. But we can offer something that we did not have. Perspective, from those who have already walked a similar path. What can you tell us? Vexor asked eagerly. What lies beyond this reality? Wonders beyond imagining, the remembrance said. Dimensions of existence where thought and reality are one, where consciousness shapes the very fabric of being, but also challenges, mysteries, and questions that have no easy answers. Is that where you exist now, beyond our reality? We exist everywhere, in the stabilization field that maintains your reality, in the spaces between universes, in dimensions you have yet to perceive. We have become something that transcends simple categories of existence. Vexor considered this, his energy form shifting through patterns that indicated deep thought. And you believe we're ready for such a transformation. We believe you have earned the right to choose it, the remembrance corrected. 700,000 years ago, we returned to save your civilization from extinction. Now you have grown beyond anything we could have imagined, developed in ways we could not have predicted. The students have, in many ways, surpassed the teachers. But not in all ways, Talia noted. Or you wouldn't be here, offering guidance. There is always more to learn, the remembrance acknowledged. Even for us, perhaps especially for us. That is why we have come, not only to offer perspective, but to propose a joining. A joining? Vexor echoed, uncertain of the meaning. If your unity chooses the path of transcendence, you will eventually encounter what remains of humanity in the spaces beyond conventional reality. We propose that when that time comes, we explore the greater mysteries together, not as separate species, but as fellow seekers of understanding. The implications were staggering. What the remembrance was suggesting wasn't just an alliance or a partnership, but an eventual merging of civilizations, the unity and whatever humanity had become, joining to explore realms of existence beyond anything either had known alone. Why would you want this? Vexor asked. After everything that happened between our peoples, the war, the attempted genocide, why seek such a profound connection? The remembrance's form shifted again, patterns of light suggesting a depth of emotion that transcended simple categories. Because, in our long evolution, we have learned that the greatest wisdom comes from diversity of perspective, because the ancient conflicts between us are meaningless in the face of the greater mysteries that await. And because, despite everything, we remember what it means to be human, to seek connection, to build bridges, to forgive. Vexor and Talia exchanged the equivalent of meaningful glances, their energy forms resonating with shared understanding. What the remembrance offered was more than they could have imagined, a future not just of transcendence, but of reconciliation and shared discovery. We cannot speak for the entire unity, Vexor said finally. The Council must vote on the Transcendence Initiative, and this new proposal would need to be considered as well. But I believe many would welcome the opportunity you describe. Of course, the remembrance agreed. The choice must be freely made by all who would be affected. We ask only that you consider the possibility. We will, Talia promised. And regardless of the outcome, we thank you for this revelation. For 700,000 years we have wondered about your fate, about whether any trace of humanity remained in the universe. To know that you not only exist, but have continued to evolve and grow, it brings a sense of completion to a story that began long ago. The remembrance's form began to fade, its patterns of light growing dimmer. The story never truly ends, it said, its voice becoming distant. It only changes form, as we all do. Until we meet again in this reality or beyond it, remember what humanity's last gift taught you. That transformation, while sometimes painful, is also the path to greater understanding. With those words, the figure vanished completely, and the Nexus returned to its dormant state, its inner light once again a subtle glow rather than a brilliant radiance. Vexlor and Talia stood in silence for several moments, absorbing what had just occurred. Finally, Vexlor's energy form shifted to indicate determination. "We should inform the Council," he said. "This changes everything." "Does it?" Talia asked. "Or does it simply confirm what we already suspected? That there is more to existence than we have yet discovered, and that the path forward lies in transformation rather than stasis?" Vexlor considered this. "Perhaps you're right. Perhaps humanity's last weapon was never really a weapon at all, but a key. A means of unlocking potential that would otherwise have remained dormant. And now they offer us another key," Talia noted, "another transformation, another evolution. The question is whether we're ready to use it." Talia's energy form rippled in what had become the unity equivalent of laughter. 700,000 years ago, humanity asked themselves the same question. Their answer saved our civilization. I think we owe it to them, and to ourselves, to be equally bold. Vexor turned his attention back to the stars visible beyond the observation platform. Somewhere out there, in dimensions he could not yet perceive, what remained of humanity was waiting, not as conquerors or saviors this time, but as fellow travelers on a journey into the unknown. "Earth's last weapon awakens," he murmured, recalling the words he had spoken 700,000 years ago. But it was never truly a weapon, was it? It was a beginning. And now, we stand at another beginning, Talia agreed. Another awakening. Together, they watched as the galactic core pulsed with energy that had once been human consciousness, transformed into the foundation of a new reality. A reality that had sustained them for 700,000 years and would now serve as the launching point for their next great evolution. The cycle was complete, and yet it was just beginning.